Welcome to a play-by-play review. I am your host, Henry, and here with my fourth episode, it will be the first non-sports episode of my podcast, finally. Not that I don't like doing sports, but I also want to switch things up a little bit. So as I alluded to in my previous episode, previewing the National Football Conference, I don't really know why I had to go with a whole acronym there, the 2025 NFC preview for football, I stated that I want to do a Star Wars episode on some of the audiobooks I just finished listening to, that being the X-Wing Wraith Squadron trilogy, so books 5 through 7 in the X-Wing series, as well as the Courtship of Princess Leia. So I'm going to be kind of doing a sort of review, kind of just talking about my thoughts on them, what I liked, what I didn't like about all of them, and just trying to go over my thoughts on what I think, not really what I think, but what they kind of meant for Star Wars, and the expanded universe. Since these are old novels, these all came out in the 90s, and they deal with old canon, and I'll go over context in a little bit here for those who are not super familiar with Star Wars. But I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, and I like talking about the lore of Star Wars. I'm a big kind of lore nerd in general. And these novels, besides being fun stories, have a lot of lore to them. And I kind of want to, just talk about it a little bit, since that's kind of what I created this podcast to do, is just talk about things that I like. So I'll try to have this episode be a little bit shorter than my first three episodes. Well, my second one where I did a play-by-play is kind of more, I can't really control the time on that one since I was doing a live play-by-play of a baseball game. But my two conference previews, my first and third episodes, were definitely longer than I would have liked. And I'm definitely going to try and attempt to at least keep this episode on the shorter side from where I've been so far, just to, not bore too many of you out there. I thank you for listening in anyway. So without further ado, I'll begin with some of the context of just try and get people who might not be as familiar, or are Star Wars fans but don't know too much about the expanded universe and some of this older stuff, since it's no longer canon. So after Return of the Jedi, which comes out in 1983. Star Wars at that point has just the three movies, so A New Hope, although at that point it would have just been referred to as Star Wars. So episode 4, 5, and 6, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Star Wars kind of takes a bit of takes its time getting back into things. Obviously the sequel trilogy. The sequel trilogy wouldn't come out until 2015, but the prequel trilogy wouldn't come out until 98, 99, whenever The Phantom Menace comes out. So there's pretty much a 15-year gap in between movie trilogies. And there's obviously a lot of time between that, and there's a lot of stories to be told in the Star Wars universe. Since one thing that I think George Lucas did really, really well with his original trilogy is world building and setting up just a lot of open-endedness despite having good, definitive stories. Even just the first Star Wars movie, it's a good self-contained story, and then the original trilogy is a good self-contained trilogy of stories as well. But there's still a ton of worlds that he's created, a lot of stories that could be told, and a lot of stories that do eventually get told in one way or another. So it does take a little while to get going, especially kind of through the 80s. There wasn't a lot of definitive, interesting new Star Wars stories to be told. One thing that does kind of get going essentially is this company called West End Games. It's a role-playing, kind of like Wizards of the Coast, which they're the company that makes Dungeons and Dragons. West End Games was the publisher for the Star Wars role-playing game, which is similar to D&D. It's like a tabletop role-playing game. I've not played it, but I've seen stuff about it, mainly the West End Games source books. And this isn't super, super important, but it's something that I find very interesting. And it does tie in a little bit to this. is that their West End Games creates a lot of source books, like something like 30, 40, 50 source books, basically, over the span of about 10 years for the Star Wars role-playing game, which is just insane, by the way. Like, that is so much information to just be putting out for Star Wars and the role-playing game. And it's a lot of, rules and just like characters that they come up with and just little events, backstories, just a lot of lore expansions in general. And so their expanded universe, as it would become known, gets kind of started in 1991 with the release of Heir to the Empire, written by Timothy Zahn, which is the start of the Thrawn trilogy, or the Heir to the Empire trilogy, whichever one you want to call it. So Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Last Command comes out back to back to back years, and borrows some information from these source books. That's a lot of, it creates events and also goes a little bit into a lot of various events, both known and unknown at that point. And Zahn has stated that he has used some information from these various source books. Not all, like 50 of them came out all at once. It was over that gradual 10-year period to 97 when the company would go bankrupt. But again, there's still so many source books that they would take information from, and a lot of it would go into these eventual expanded universe stories. A lot of them were novels, like the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Also a lot of comics, so the Dark Empire comics, which came out kind of around that same time, 91, 95, or 91 to 95. And so for anyone who's watched Rise of Skywalker, the most recent, actually, is it the most recent Star Wars movie, period, which is weird to think about because there's been so much Star Wars, but the last movie was in 2019 now. But Rise of Skywalker takes a lot of inspiration from the Dark Empire comics, and I won't get into that. That's a whole separate thing I could talk about. But anyway, TLDR is the expanded universe, which is sort of this canon adjacent. It's kind of was accepted to be canon at the time, but it's all these stories created by various authors to expand the universe, basically, for lack of a better word, for Star Wars outside of just the original trilogy. The Heir to the Empire trilogy is usually considered the holy grail of the EU, which is now considered Star Wars Legends after Disney's acquisition of the Star Wars brand in 2012. They subsequently decanonized everything except for basically the movies and the Clone Wars TV show. So the expanded universe, as it was known, has since become Star Wars Legends. I'll probably just flip and back and forth between referring to those because they mean the same thing. So anyway, a lot of context for something that's not even addressing the actual stories I will be talking about here in a sec. But among the expanded universe novels are the X-Wing series, which was started by Michael A. Stackpole. He actually started writing the X-Wing series of comics, the Rogue Squadron series of comics, which focuses on the titular Rogue Squadron, which was a thing in the original trilogy, but kind of gets reformed during these comics. The main protagonist of Rogue Squadron is Wedge Antilles, who is a minor character in Episode 4 and Episode 6. He is technically present in Episode 5 at the Battle of Hoth, but we don't actually see him on screen. But Wedge is... I'm looking up who he's played by because I don't remember the actor's name off the top of my head. It is Dennis Lawson. So if you're trying to picture him in Episode 4 during the Battle of the Death Star, he's got sort of like this matte black helmet, and he's one of the few pilots that survives. He's flying with Luke in the trench run, and he gets hit by Darth Vader, but his X-Wing survives, and Luke's like, get out of there, Wedge, you can't do anymore, get back there, and Wedge is like, sorry, and then he breaks off. And then he's also, in Episode 6, he's flying alongside Lando, while Lando's in the Millennium Falcon, Wedge is in his X-Wing, and they're the ones that go into the second Death Star and blow it up from the inside. Wedge gets his character expanded heavily in these Rogue Squadron comics, where he's sort of the main protagonist of them since he's leading Rogue Squadron. The comics introduce a bunch of characters for Rogue Squadron, which then get continued on in the Rogue Squadron novels. So books 1 through 4 of the Rogue Squadron novels are X-Wing Rogue Squadron is the first one, so pretty titular there. Then Wedge's Gamble, the Krytos Trap, and the Back to War, which those 4 are sort of one continuous story. They're each like work on their own story-wise, but also tell one overarching story as well. And the Krytos Trap especially is really, really good between those 4. And so after that, those come out in kind of the mid-90s. Wraith Squadron, the trilogy is X-Wing Wraith Squadron, so similar to Rogue Squadron, where the squadron gets their book title as the first part. I think that makes sense. But so it's X-Wing Wraith Squadron, X-Wing Iron Fist, and X-Wing Solo Command. Those 3 I will be talking about, as well as the Courtship of Princess Leia. That I have not really gone in the context of yet, but so I'll deviate right quick here just to go over that. So Courtship comes out in 1994. 1994, written by Dave Wolverton. And it's details. So I'm trying to go through context as fast as I can, but I tend to get sidetracked when I'm talking about context in Star Wars. So apologies for this. But so in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, it is established that Han and Leia are married. Leia is pregnant and gives birth to twins over the course of that trilogy. Dave Wolverton saw this and was like, there has to be some more drama to this. It couldn't have just been marriage, which like they couldn't have just gone straight into marriage. There has to have been some drama. So he creates Courtship of Princess Leia, which is this love triangle story, and I'll get into this later when I talk specifically about Courtship. But that is the kind of the main driving force is this love triangle involving Han, Leia, and another character. But one thing that Courtship does is that it introduces a secondary villain named Warlord Zsinj. Warlord is his title, Zsinj is his name. And Zsinj, while he's sort of the secondary antagonist for Courtship, he gets expanded upon starting in some of these source books by West End Games. One of them, Kraken's Threat Dossier, which is written from the perspective of a New Republic intelligence operative delivering to General Aaron Kraken, who is the head of New Republic intelligence. And it's interesting to see how it's like written from a sort of in-universe perspective, and it adds a lot of characterization to a variety of things from it's split into 3 different sections. One section is on events covered in Courtship, and so it adds a lot of character to Zsinj. And therefore, the Wraith Squadron trilogy further expands on some of the events described in Kraken's Threat Dossier to provide it kind of provides a lot of framework for a lot of the story beats for the Wraith Squadron trilogy. So to frame in-universe date-wise, because it's a little important to understand kind of when all these take place. So the original Star Wars, A New Hope, Episode 4, whatever you want to call it, is sort of the year zero for how we as fans track Star Wars dates. So it's how Star Wars the dating system works is before and after the Battle of Yavin, BBY and ABY. Battle of Yavin being the fight over the Death Star and the eventual destruction of the first Death Star. So Episode 4 is kind of 0 ABY, 0 BBY, just kind of that. It's sort of like BC and AD for how we date things in real life. It's sort of that sort of ground point. Episode 6 takes place 4 years after Episode 4, so 4 ABY. And then the subsequent novels, which I will soon be getting to talk about, I promise, is about 6.5 to 8 years after the Battle of Yavin. with Courtship specifically taking place in 8 ABY, whereas the Wraith Squadron trilogy takes place more around 7.5 years after the Battle of Yavin. And also for reference, I'm using Wikipedia, which is just the Star Wars version of Wikipedia, as my references for this because it's awesome. So I think that's mostly everything covered context-wise. I believe so. So I'll start with Wraith Squadron, the novel specifically, and go from there. So I'm going to go the Wraith Squadron novels and then end with Courtship, since that's how it is chronologically for in-universe how they take place. So now to the actual review. Wraith Squadron, the novel, is good. I'd say it's probably my least favorite of the three, because it's a little long compared to the other three. It's a little bit longer. I think the audiobook's around a little under 15 hours. It's like 14 and a half. Iron Fist is like a little over 11, and Solo Command's around 12. And one of the main reasons for it is that Wraith Squadron takes a good while to introduce the titular Wraith Squadron because they're basically all original characters. Rogue Squadron had the benefit of a lot of their characters being already existing through the Rogue Squadron comics. It did certainly introduce plenty of original characters, but it also had it also had like Wedge, a lot of so like characters like Tycho Selchu and Wes Jansen. Some of the mainstays of Rogue Squadron were they were introduced in that sort of the comics instead of just the novels themselves. However, for Wraith Squadron, it didn't have the benefit of those prior comics, so it takes a while to kind of get going. But it's still like it's not that the start is bad at all. I actually think a lot of the early stuff is pretty interesting to see how Wedge creates Wraith Squadron. Since again, going back to Rogue Squadron a little bit, just to add a tiny bit more context, Rogue Squadron, the reformed Rogue Squadron in the New Republic, which is what the Rebel Alliance forms after the defeat of the Emperor in Episode 6. Rogue Squadron is formed as it's supposed to be this sort of best of the best, like getting all of the best pilots from around the New Republic to be in this one squad. The original novel is kind of framed to this, like, its tagline's almost like Top Gun, but in space, basically. So it's a lot of these ace pilots who also wind up having some good, like, commando skills as a bonus. A lot of, especially in the comics, a lot of their missions aren't just, flying around doing dogfights in space. It's also being on the ground doing like infiltration stuff there. So at the start of Wraith Squadron, when Wedge is talking to Admiral Akbar, and a sort of overrunning theme for the X-Wing series is that Wedge is so successful that Akbar and a lot of the New Republic really want to promote him to general because he deserves it and he's really good at his job. But Wedge really just wants to fly an X-Wing. That's basically all he wants to do. And he's also not even 30 yet by this time. He's still very young, so he just does not want to be that high-ranking general. And so they basically, Wedge and Akbar basically make a bet together where Wedge will form a sort of antithesis to Rogue Squadron, or not antithesis, so to say, but the goal is to take up a bunch of sort of, it's supposed to be a commando squadron first with a pilot, piloting as a bonus, essentially. It's sort of the opposite of Rogue Squadron in that sense. And how he does it is that he basically goes around and finds just all of the washouts, all of the misfits, all of the people that are on their like last legs, and like this is their last shot at being a fighter pilot, being just even a soldier for the New Republic. And that's the squad that he winds up forming Wraith Squadron out of, which is, I think, a pretty neat setup where it's, instead of just being the best of the best and, the reliable soldiers, it's not at all. It's people that are kind of loose cannons, people that need a lot of work put in to succeed. And so while the actual, not job search, but like churning through candidates is a little quick in the story. It's like they say that they have like 70 candidates or so, and on the next page it's basically like they've narrowed it down to the dozen that they eventually form. It's the actual, Wraith Squadron candidates. The story spends a lot of time with them, you know, showcasing their issues, like why they're here, why they're almost like why they were selected, what issues they need to overcome. And it's very well done by the author, Aaron Alston, to just create natural ways of building character arcs. So for Wraith Squadron, I won't go in depth to every single member because that's just going to make this incredibly long. But among Wraith Squadron, so there's Wedge. He also brings over Wes Jansen from Rogue Squadron. Wes he's a background character, basically an extra in the actual movie trilogy. Gets expanded on a lot in Rogue Squadron, where he's kind of a happy-go-lucky jokester almost. He's like always got a smile on his face. He's always pretty optimistic and pretty carefree, and he's a good like antithesis to the more straight-laced Wedge. They provide a good dynamic in the Wraith Squadron trilogy. Wedge is kind of one of the main protagonists of Wraith Squadron. Another one is one of the Wraiths, Kel Tainer, who is his kind of main thing is that his dad flew with the Rebel Alliance, but on a mission where he was flying with Wes Jansen, he basically had a panic attack, and they were doing a stealth mission, so Wes was forced to shoot Kel's dad down and kill him to save the mission. So Kel holds a lot of resentment towards Wes because of that, and also has a lot of self-confidence issues as well. So seeing a lot of how Kel grows over the course of the trilogy is really, really interesting, and it's set up really well in the first novel, in Wraith Squadron specifically, where we get a good view of like who he is, where he starts he's described as a very tall person, like a kind of almost a hulking man almost, but he's pretty quiet and pretty reserved. So just seeing his evolution is very, very interesting. And so Wedge and Kel are kind of the two main perspectives that we follow through the course of the trilogy. But we do get a lot of kind of minor, it's third person. And we get a lot of perspective shifts between the Wraiths and even some of the villains. And the villains are going to be something that I'm going to talk about a lot through this, since especially with Zsinj, who's kind of the overarching villain for this. So in Wraith Squadron, after their initial training, where the squad itself kind of gets brought together and they start figuring things out, they're attacked by an Imperial Admiral, Apwar Triget, who is a subordinate of Zsinj. So Apwar Triget, I don't really know. I don't need to keep saying his first name. Just Admiral Triget. He's the main villain for Wraith Squadron. Zsinj takes a backseat for the first novel, but he comes more into play in the second and third novels. And I'll also try to avoid spoiling everything. I probably should have said that earlier, but there's definitely going to be spoilers here. But I'll try not to, just go beat by beat, like just summarizing the entire, all the novels. I'll try and at least leave at least some parts unspoiled for those who want to actually go and read or listen to these novels, which I would recommend. They're fun, but I'll definitely have to spoil some things. So Triget's forces wind up attacking the Wraiths at their base, and it's a pretty good space battle. One thing that I think Aaron Alston, the author of the Wraith Squadron novels, does really, really well is space battles, which is a good thing since these novels are very much focused on a lot of air combat, space combat with X-Wings, and even larger fleet battles. And he's very good at framing a lot of these battles for Wraith Squadron, for the Wraith Squadron novels. So It's kind of sped through a little bit of the start of Wraith Squadron, but a lot of the early parts of the book are basically just getting to know the Wraiths, getting set up for how everything's going, and what to expect, kind of what the audience is to expect for how this squadron's supposed to operate. There's still there's a lot of like colorful characters. One of them who I haven't mentioned yet, who's also kind of a main character, is Garrick Lauren, although his nickname's Face. So he was a Imperial child movie star, basically, who wound up, he got kidnapped when he was like a teenager or something like that by extremist rebels, basically. And while I think they were originally planning on killing him, they decided to spare him, and Face wound up basically just working for the rebellion instead, after kind of learning to realize that the Empire wasn't all that whatsoever. His brainwashing basically wore off. And so he's a very interesting character, where we see a lot of like his acting skills on display, and he becomes one of the leaders of Wraith Squadron. He's a really, really fun character to watch grow. He's not one of the major like head cases. I actually don't even remember exactly why he was selected for Wraith Squadron. I think it was just because he was like former Imperial and like people didn't trust him. And I think I know it's also been a couple months since I've went through Wraith Squadron specifically, that novel specifically. So some of the specific details are still a bit fuzzy, or like have been a bit fuzzy since I've been just churning through novels. But overall, Face is a very fun character to follow through the story. And so it takes him a little bit to get into his leadership role, and especially during their first battle. So it's Battle of Folor Base, which is the first major engagement, which is it's the base where Wraith Squadron was training. It started out, and then Trigget, who just kind of almost happened to come on it by accident, didn't really know Wraith Squadron existed because it was kept pretty secret, but wound up coming into the system anyway through some various means. And it's a good battle with a lot of stuff that's set up so far in the story. And it's an early instance of the race using a lot of trickery, where Kel and his wingman Runt, who's this like basically a horse, almost think like BoJack Horseman is what I can basically describe as Runt's appearance. He's like, I think I forget if it's his species name or his last name is like Ekwash, or Ekwish. So his last name is Ekwish. He just goes by Runt, since he is sort of the runt of the litter, basically, where he's actually like, he's really, really tall compared to humans, but he's actually was like really, really small compared to the rest of like his siblings, basically the rest of his herd pack. I don't really know what you want to call it, but he's this sort of horse-like alien who has like multiple personalities in his head, which is just it's a side effect or not really a side effect. It's just a part of his species biology, is that they have multiple personalities that develop over time. And Kel gets paired with Runt during training, and Kel kind of learns how to help focus Runt as his wingman, which is a good little story arc there. But so Kel, Runt, and then a couple of A-Wing pilots from a different squadron wind up basically just faking themselves as Han Solo, Princess Leia, and the Millennium Falcon, and basically just luring away Trigget's Star Destroyer from the rest of the engagement when in that first battle. And it's a really, really well done sequence, just kind of since the Trigget and then by extension Zsinj are rivals towards Han Solo. In Courtship, Zsinj is introduced as this Imperial rival to Han Solo. They're like dueling generals, basically, that have been fighting for a year, like at that point, a year and a half, basically. This whole Hunt for Zsinj campaign is Han Solo trying to track down and take down Zsinj on behalf of the New Republic. He's promoted to general at this point. So knowing that Kel basically duping Trigget with Han Solo is just one of the first of many various trickery. There are various forms of trickery that Wraith Squadron use, and it's something that you see and it's like, oh, this isn't going to be your typical Star Wars story. This is going to be a lot of fun little deceptions. And the Wraith Squadron trilogy it's got a lot of very comedic moments to it, which I was not expecting going in. It's a very amusing trilogy. It's not specifically comedy, but it's very fun when it when it actually leans into its comedic aspects. It's very fun. So I'll try not to go through every single specific battle for this between all the trilogy and in Courtship, but basically as Wraith Squadron, as the book goes on, the Wraiths gain more and more. They get closer together, and after Trigget raids their base, they were already kind of geared towards fighting against Zsinj anyway, since that was the main threat to the New Republic at this point, between all the warlords. And for reference, because I didn't really explain what a warlord is. So after the Emperor dies in Episode 6, a lot of these surviving Imperial admirals, moffs, generals, whatnot, who had forces under their command, a lot of them either split off or kind of formed together into the Imperial Remnant. Those who split off took the title of warlord, with Zsinj specifically being the one to inspire that. Out of universe, it's because Zsinj was the first quote-unquote warlord to be given that official title by any author. He was introduced as Warlord Zsinj, and retrospectively, all of these sort of rogue Imperial commanders basically took on that title of warlord. Some of them did have different titles. So the book I'm reading right now, Isard's Revenge, which comes after the Wraith Squadron trilogy, has one of the villains is a Prince Admiral, which, side note, I'll try to not tangent too much, but this is something that I've been thinking about for a little while, is that one thing that I really like about these expanded universe novels dealing with these warlords and stuff is that they have really fun titles for their villains, and it's also really in line with a lot of just with the Empire as a whole. So Zsinj himself, warlord, he calls himself a warlord. He also wears a uniform of a Grand Admiral, which he never obtained. So again, very arrogant there. Thrawn in the Thrawn campaign is a Grand Admiral. So he's not just an Admiral, he is a Grand Admiral. He's, better than an Admiral. In Isard's Revenge, Delek Krennel is a Prince Admiral, a title he gave to himself. He's not just an Admiral, he's a Prince Admiral. Another one, Truan Teradok, is a High Admiral. Can't just be an Admiral, he's got to be a High Admiral. Got to be better than the rest. It's such a good way of both creating a, more of a threat, this guy he's got a interesting title. He's got a unique title. You got to pay attention to him a little bit more as a villain, and also totally in line with, these arrogant military commanders of the Empire, where they just completely believe themselves to be better. And, they can't just be an admiral. They can't be like everyone else. They have to be, a High Admiral, a Prince Admiral, a Grand Admiral, or even going back to Episode 4, Tarkin can't just be a Moff, he has to be a Grand Moff. So that's something that I think Star Wars does very well, is create these kind of, fun titles that also work in both in and out of context. So anyway, back to the actual story. So after the Wraith Squadron evacuates their base, and they basically start working on actually tracking down Trigget and, by extension, Zsinj. And one of the for a good chunk of the story, the Wraiths wind up basically going in disguise. So they not long after the first battle, or the Battle of Folor, they wind up getting ambushed, but then ambushing back a CR-90, a modified CR-90 Corvette called the Nightcaller, which was under employ of Zsinj and Trigget. For reference, the first ship we ever see in Star Wars, the Tantive 4 Princess Leia ship, it's right after the opening title crawl in A New Hope. The ship that's running away from the Imperial Star Destroyer with like, it's got the sort of like dozen or so engines all in a like square together on the back. It's kind of small, kind of sleek. That is a CR-90 Corvette. So another one of those that's been modified a little bit gets basically taken over by the race, and they disguise themselves as the crew of that to basically have free reign in Zsinj's territory to basically do whatever they want. And it's a very, very fun sequence of events that they do for much of the story. And one thing that I think is very amusing and it really helps develop or showcase Face's talents is that the captain of the Nightcaller, Durillion, was such an arrogant buffoon that he wouldn't record his captain's logs basically as audios. He would do it basically full on like recording his entire visual, like do a visual recording of his entire like room, his entire form basically. And he did so many of them that after he died in the reverse ambush that Wraith Squadron pulled, the Wraith Squadron techs and the New Republic techs were able to basically just create an AI live generated mapping of him in like hologram form that they could basically use in any transmission they could use when talking with anyone from Zsinj. So Face would basically put on a mocap suit, for lack of a better term, and act as the very, very full of himself Captain Durillion. And coming through the hologram, through Trigget or Zsinj, whoever it would be, they would have no idea because the program that they created was so good because there was so much reference data they could use from Durillion. And it's just such a fun little, like, just a little detail that, again, showcases the arrogance of the Empire. And it's just something that I found very, very interesting and very amusing of just this guy is so full of himself that it wound up unintentionally being incredibly detrimental towards the Empire because the race were very, very good at using this deception against Zsinj and Trigget, mostly Trigget at this point, but Zsinj's empire as a whole. One of them specifically that, again, also both amusing and also very cool to see, and is also like just a very interesting plot point to watch is that the race as Nightcaller were basically forced to, or we're going to be forced to have to dock with an Imperial Star Destroyer, I believe, or it might have been a Victory, I don't know, and a ship under Trigget's command called the Hawkbat. And so they obviously couldn't, go and dock there specifically, go in person because they're not the crew of the Nightcaller. They are Wraith Squadron. So they have to go to a planet that the Star Destroyer is docked at, go under cover of night, or basically disguise themselves in a variety of different groups to infiltrate the planet, which has a variety of different buildings. One of them, it houses like all the food or something that the Star Destroyer is going to be using, basically resupplying. And they basically have to go in, disguise themselves, do this whole like super secret mission to basically just sprinkle some drugs basically onto the food, and in order to give the entire Star Destroyer crew food poisoning, so that when their scheduled meetup with the Star Destroyer, they have the excuse of like, the Star Destroyer calls in and is like, oh yeah, sorry, we can't actually dock with you because our entire crew has food poisoning. We're not up to meeting you. And so it's this like multi-chapter long story arc in the middle of Wraith Squadron, where they're basically doing this really, really in-depth, where like the entire team, and it's like 12 of them, have like 4 different, they split into like 4 different groups with like 4 different sets of disguises. It's like this really, really in-depth mission where they have like multi-stage plans. It's really tense at some points, all to basically just give an entire crew of a Star Destroyer food poisoning, so they don't have to meet them in person. And this is like, in the grand scheme of things, it's like a minor part of the story. I mean, it's not minor, but like compared to, the big space battles, it's like, it's not nothing. It's basically, it's giving them food poisoning, but it's what they have to do. It's what Wraith Squad, it's just this zany little, misfit squadron that they just wind up having to do this. They weren't planning on it, but this is just what they had to do. And it's such a fun little adventure. I really, really enjoyed it. Anyway, so as Wraith Squadron goes along, and as the novel progresses, they wind up coming into conflict with Trigget and his Star Destroyer. They wind up destroying it, although not without a couple losses on their side. So Trigget goes down with a ship. We also get introduced to another character named, at the time, Garapetithel, who is working as a lieutenant in the Star Destroyer itself. I'm blanking on the name of Trigget's Star Destroyer, but I think Implacable, that's what it's called. So she's working as a lieutenant in Implacable, but after, like, as the ship's going down, basically, or as it's getting disabled, we get a little bit of setup for where we're going to see her in the following two stories, where she ditches her lieutenant uniform and basically disguises herself as Trigget's mistress, and basically drugs herself to fool the New Republic, since, as it later gets revealed, she is, and this isn't really a spoiler, this basically gets revealed almost immediately at the start of Iron Fist. She is a Imperial intelligence officer who is kind of like floating around in the wind. At that point, she was working under Trigget, but her moral code conflicted with Trigget's, specifically in that Trigget was completely willing to throw away the Implacable as it was going down, like not surrender, and basically just letting the entire crew of tens of thousands die, which Garapetithel, who later would be more known throughout the stories as Lara Notzol. Lara would basically just did not agree with that philosophy whatsoever. So she was completely willing to shift gears and still work for Zsinj at that point, but completely disown any relations with Trigget. And her story arc in the following two novels is really, really interesting, as she winds up basically becoming a mole within Wraith Squadron, since she gets picked up by the New Republic and Wraith Squadron after the Implacable goes down at the end of the first novel, and gets brought in by Face and another member, Wraith Squadron Ton Fanon, they basically brought her in since she showed some skill at flying. They didn't know she was a spy at that point. And there was also some other stuff that they had her help out with some in relation to another member of Wraith Squadron, Tyria Sarkin, and her backstory. And I'll leave that up to, I won't spoil what goes in there, because I think that's a good, it's something that is interesting to develop, and something that I think you all listening, wherever it is you're listening to, should experience for yourselves. But basically, Lara gets brought in, and she's a really, really interesting character to follow in her dynamic with Mindonos, another member of Wraith Squadron, who was a former commander of another squadron, I believe called Talon Squadron, like similar to any X-Wing squadron. They wound up getting completely wiped out at the start of the first novel by a trap set by Trigget, and also due to intel provided by Lara back when she was working undercover in the New Republic, even before she was working directly for Trigget. So their dynamic especially is really, really interesting to watch, or read, I guess, in this case, as the novels progress, and everything that comes out of that. Anyway, that's that. I'll try not to spoil that too much, because that's some good twists there. But yeah, so for Wraith Squadron, the first novel, I think I got most of the summary. It's basically a lot of, after the introductions of Wraith Squadron, It's a lot of various different missions that they go on to eventually get closer and closer to combating against Trigget and the Implacable, and really showcasing who the Wraiths are, what they're good at, and like what kind of story this is, like it is, what the trilogy will end up being, and also like what kind of missions the Wraith Squadron goes on, which is very wild and very unpredictable missions because it's a lot of involves a lot of improvisation, a lot of disguise, a lot of stealth, a lot of trickery, a lot of flying as well. So it's a very unique like it almost a spy thriller, almost, but not quite a spy thriller. But it's a lot of deception and a lot of misdirection that Wraith Squadron is forced to use in a very, very interesting way. And that's especially in the first, in Wraith Squad, in the first novel. It is very, very, it's very prevalent and very, very fun to follow. So, as for the next novel, Iron Fist, so after the destruction of the Implacable and victory there, the Wraiths continue fighting against Iron Fist, and I should say, so Warlord Zsinj has a super Star Destroyer called the Iron Fist, which is also where the novel gets its name from. So the Super Star Destroyer is the same class of ship as Darth Vader's ship, the Executor, which is the giant, like gray dagger-like ship that we see in Episode 5 and 6. So same class of ship there, and it's his flagship. It's Zinj's flagship. It's the backbone of his fleet, and so it's obviously a very very major threat that they have to deal with. And so as the second novel begins, and as the Wraiths kind of direct their attention more towards Zsinj specifically, they wind up getting paired up with Han Solo, who is leading his own task force at that point. And again, he is a general at this point. Not that he's really enjoying his time being general. He would much rather. It's said multiple times throughout the stories where Han would much rather be a just in his Falcon, just doing whatever it is he wants to do to help out the New Republic, instead of being stuck in a uniform, stuck on the bridge of a ship. Like, he's completely willing to do it, especially like he's seeing it through to the end of this point because he's so fed up with Zsinj and just being just unable to land that definitive blow on Zsinj. And it's the same thing with Zsinj as well, where both of them are like so just frustrated with each other at the point where, since they've been fighting for a year or so at this point, maybe not a full year, but it's been a good long while at this point, and neither of them are able to definitively land any decisive victories against either one, or even like get a killing blow on either one. So they're just constantly fighting against each other over and over again, and they're just both getting fed up at this point. And I think at this point I should go more into Zsinj himself, since this is where he becomes less of a background character and more of takes more of the spotlight, since at this point Trigget is dead, and Zsinj is now the primary focus of the Han Solo's Zsinj hunting task force. Let's go with that. Yeah. So Zsinj is a character who was introduced in Courtship, and I'll go over. He didn't get a lot of characterization in Courtship. Mostly what we got was that he is smart, has a big fleet, and is a rival to Han Solo. His character gets expanded upon in the Kraken Threat Dossier source book, but it's like a couple paragraphs, like maybe a page worth of story for Zsinj. So it's something there, a little bit of backstory, but not too much. So his character, he gets a lot more characterization in Iron Fist and Solo Command. Basically, Zsinj at this point, he's a very, very interesting man to watch or read about. I'll just say watch because I'm more of a screen guy and TV guy at this point than like a book guy. Even though this comes with anyway. Zsinj he's a very, very smart person, a very, very good tactician, and a very, very deceptive person, which on the surface it does not look like him at all. So his appearance is basically described as he's like fat, balding, has a very, very oversized and very, very well kept mustache. He wears, like I said before, he wears a white Imperial Grand Admiral uniform, despite never having obtained the rank. He carries himself in a very haughty manner, a very arrogant manner a lot of the time. Is completely willing to play the fool as well when it suits him. So he will look and act like, I feel like, a typical arrogant, almost incompetent leader that that we see a lot in the Empire, basically. But underneath, he's actually a very, very deceptive, very, very perceptive person as well. His entire persona basically is an act. He's very much a cold and calculating individual, and is also very, and I think I'm kind of repeating myself, where he's very devious, but he's someone who is not just throw his entire force, just try and win through overwhelming force all the time. He has plans on plans on plans on plans, and a lot of, especially in the latter two novels of the Wraith Squadron trilogy, a lot of it is dealing with just the numerous different little bits of like contingencies and operations that Zsinj has created for his own empire, since he's not part of the collective Imperial Remnant, which is like the main group of Imperial commanders and officers who have banded together to create like, hey, we're still the Galactic Empire. Palpatine may be dead, but we're still the Galactic Empire. Follow us. Zsinj has taken his own forces, created his own empire, still with the goal of reestablishing the Galactic Empire, but basically with him in control. So he's made so much, like just so many different plans. He's basically created his own like economy. He has like a bunch of planets under his control. He's got just so many different options that he can use that it's just to get to him for the race. It takes them so long and through so many different obstacles. And even then, they don't even get him in the end, which, spoilers, not really for Wraith Squadron, but since Zsinj obviously shows up in Courtship, which takes place after the Wraith Squadron trilogy, he's still alive by then. He does not survive through Courtship, but again, I'll get to that in a bit, since I have some opinions about Courtship. Not all of them good. Anyway, I'll try and speed this up a little bit because I have been rambling a bit more than I would like. Zsinj is a very interesting character. He's a very, very fun villain to watch the heroes try to fight against, since he's both crafty and yet still very arrogant at the same time. Like, he definitely knows his arrogance, but he's still not exactly prone to it. Basically, he's able to control himself whenever Han Solo is not involved, but whenever Han gets involved, he's kind of loses his cool a lot, especially in Solo Command. Wraith Squadron, he's a bit more composed, but basically in Iron Fist, he's a lot more composed, and so a lot of Iron Fist specifically in that novel is the Wraiths again doing more of their deception. For much of Iron Fist, they take the guise of pirates and basically willing to work for Zsinj to kind of get more into what they understand, get close to what his goals are, which they eventually find out that he's planning on traveling to Kuwait to steal another Super Star Destroyer. For reference, Kuat is a planet in the inner parts of the galaxy. I won't try and describe the whole galaxy for you because it's hard to do without a visual aid. But basically, Kuat is a massive shipyard planet. It is a lot of the designers and production facilities there are responsible for most of the ships in the Empire. So the classic Imperial Star Destroyer that we see in basically anything, whenever the Empire is on screen, it is the Imperial ship. It's the big gray wedge, basically, big gray triangle. That is the Imperial Star Destroyer. That was designed at Kuat. The Super Star Destroyers were also designed at Kuat, and so at this point, they're independent at this point from anyone. They're basically just their own company. The Kuat Drive Yards is their own company. Kuat's independent from everyone. And they're building another Executor class Super Star Destroyer, the Razor's Kiss. And Zsinj, seeing that, is like, hey, I want that. I like those Star Destroyers. Give me that. So he basically plans on stealing it for himself. And the Wraiths are able to coordinate with Han Solo's task force to intercept and eventually disable and basically just cripple Razor's Kiss before it can escape. Zsinj is able to escape with the wreckage at the end of Iron Fist, but he is very, very upset at that point since he's lost a fully functioning Star Destroyer, or Super Star Destroyer, I should say. So it's Wraith Squad, not Wraith Squad. I keep saying Wraith Squadron when I moved on to Iron Fist. Iron Fist is kind of the middle point. Well, it is literally the middle point in the trilogy, but it's the point where like a lot of the super important events don't really take place in Iron Fist. There's plenty of stuff in the book itself, and I, again, very much recommend it. There's plenty of character moments. I think Iron Fist probably has the most focus on like growing Wraith Squadron's growth, almost, and like a lot more character moments amongst all of them. And I think it does it pretty well, but like a lot of the grander story beats are absent from Iron Fist, which kind of makes sense given that it's almost like a bridge between the start and end of the Wraith Squadron trilogy in that sense. Not that the destruction of Razor's Kiss is not important; it is very important, but it's a lot of the little things in Iron Fist are, say, not quite as important as the little things in Wraith Squadron or Solo Command. So, speaking of Solo Command, I think I'll probably just move on to it at this point. So, Solo Command, I think, is probably my favorite of the three. I think it has the best balance between like those character moments and also the greater action. It's I think it's also the best we see of Zsinj, where he's kind of starting to lose it a little bit. One of the first major battles where Zsinj ambushes Han's task force, but is unable to really do anything much of it since at that point Han's very good at commanding his task force, and also he has both Wraith and Rogue Squadron at that point, since Rogue Squadron rejoins with the task force by Iron Fist, the novel Iron Fist. So Han has a bunch of really, really skilled pilots with him, and so they're able to escape from the ambush with minor losses. And Zsinj, who's talking to his second in command, General Melvar, he's so distraught at that point. Like he just has no idea what he has to do to beat Han Solo, because he's thrown everything at that man at that point, and he's just so like, Melvar, what do? I have no idea what I'm doing at this point. Like I just don't know how I can beat Han. I've done everything, and I don't know what I can do to finally put him down. And it's like it's interesting to see like Zsinj, who is a really, really powerful individual and usually very composed, just have like not necessarily a mental breakdown, but like just so defeated while sort of coming out with a victory. Like he's so confused as to like how Han keeps getting away with it, basically. And yet at the same time, Han's basically in the same boat where he's like, I can't figure out a way to take down Zsinj. Like I can't just keep doing these like looking for signs of activity of Zinj's forces and potentially walking into a trap, but like he doesn't have a definitive answer for how he's going to put down Zsinj. So it's very interesting to see the dynamic created over the course of the trilogy, and especially in Solo Command, between Han and Zsinj, despite them not having too many direct interactions with each other. I just think it's very interesting to see how Zsinj as the villain is framed compared to Han. While Han isn't the main protagonist of this trilogy, he's one of the heroes of Star Wars, basically. So seeing their dynamic, it gives more credence to how these two are like very much intertwined rivals at this point in their lives. Another thing, I had a thought in my head on like what I was about to say next, and then I rambled on a little bit and I lost the thought. But for Solo Command, it's interesting to see. So a lot of I remember now. I was stalling, and I remember now. So Solo Command is also something where we see a lot of Zinj's like more devious plans take effect. The start of the novel has his, I think it was Project Minefield is what he calls it, where he's basically brainwashes a bunch of non-humans in the New Republic and basically turns them into sleeper agents. And at the start of the novel, he activates one of the sleeper agents to try and assassinate Admiral Akbar. It fails thanks to one of the members of the Wraith Squadron, Vort Sabinring. Sabinring, who is known by Piggy, so he is a Gamorrean, which is the kind of green pig-like aliens. We see them a little bit in Episode 6, where they're guards at Jabba's palace. So for a little bit of his backstory, since it also connects more towards the narrative for Solo Command, he was experimented on at a facility called Binring Biomedicals, Binring something, which is where he gets his last name. And they basically gave him super intelligence, for a lack of a better term. So that's why he's able to fly an X-Wing, since most Gamorreans can't. Well, any Gamorrean besides him can't, because they don't have the intelligence for it. So Piggy was there with Akbar at the start of Solo Command and is able to save him from the brainwashed assassin that Zsinj sends. And after the first main battle, where Zsinj is like so despondent, he's basically plays a lot more risky, and he basically activates all of his sleeper agents at that point. He throws caution to the wind, since he's realized that at this point the Wraith Squadron is doing way too much damage to his infrastructure, that he can't keep up this prolonged fight with Han at all. So he's basically going go big or go home at this point, and activates all of his sleeper agents. And that's not even the main, like one of the main like secret plans that he has. There's also another one, I forget the exact name of it, but it's kind of similar, related to Minefield with the alien sleeper agents that he creates, but he's basically was a project that also created Piggy, where he was basically giving super intelligence to a variety of alien life forms to basically turn them into his own super soldiers. And he's experimenting with them partly on one planet called Saphalor, which the Wraiths raid in Solo Command, and also on his own ship, the Iron Fist, which is seen both in the novel Iron Fist as well as in Solo Command. We see a little bit of that like in the depths of his ship, which is like the size of the Isle of Manhattan, basically. It's really big. But yeah, it's the plans we see of Zsinj. He's a lot more risky and a lot more dangerous by the time Solo Command gets around. And at the same time, the Wraiths are also using their own deception once again, because they use like their night color deception in Wraith Squadron. They use the pirate deception in Iron Fist, and then they wind up in Solo Command, in order to basically try to bait out Zsinj. They create a fake Millennium Falcon, basically borrowing off of Kel's idea from back at the start of Wraith Squadron, where he duped Trigget in their first battle. They basically create a fake Millennium Falcon called the Millennium Falsehood and fly it around to a bunch of like planets near Zinj's territory or in Zinj's territory to basically just cause havoc and try and draw Zsinj out. So it's a lot of cat and mouse, especially in solo command, and I think it's done really really well for how they try and all the different plans that they have on both sides, and how it's just so like unconventional for even your typical like Star Wars campaign or like Star Wars series of battles. It's not just space battle after space battle after space battle and land battle after land battle after land battle. It's a lot of deception. It's a lot of, smaller skirmishes, a lot of, waiting around, baiting out enemies, hoping they'll catch the bait. And even a lot of the battles are like not very definitive either. It's a lot of minor skirmishes and a lot of even the big battles. Like there isn't a lot of definitive wins or losses. It's a lot of just trying to escape. And I think it's a very interesting choice for the trilogy to go that way. To kind of save it saves a lot of the big like definitive battles for the end, which makes sense because that's usually how story climaxes work. But it's even then it's like it's interesting to see how just how the anticipation builds for the eventual, even though we know the fate of Zsinj and like how he eventually gets defeated for good. It's one of those where like if you're watching a prequel, it's like, all right, I know how this will eventually end, but like how do we get to that point? And it's interesting to see how the author Aaron Alston weaves his stories to get to that point, while still offering satisfying, conclusive battles that like end in a definitive victor. Eventually, at the end of Solo Command, there's Zinj's the Iron Fist gets kind of stranded after some sabotage, and Solo's forces are able to corner him basically. But at that point, Zsinj has and this one I will spoil because it's an interesting moment, but it's also it's something that's like not like a huge plot twist or whatever because it's pretty well like foreshadowed, and like not even foreshadowed. It's basically like we see like how Zsinj is going to get out of the situation he's in. He's basically he takes the wreckage of Razor's Kiss, which he renames to Second Death, since it's very appropriate for what he's about to use. He also has an orbital night cloak, which is something he will use in Courtship. So it's something that when we see it in Solo Command, it's like we as readers who have read Courtship at that point, since it comes out before. In real life, it came out before Solo Command. It's like, oh yeah, he has this technology. It makes sense. But the orbital night cloak is basically just a series of satellites that basically just link together and create a pitch black void, or pitch black screen, basically, that completely jams any sensors, any readings whatsoever. So it basically just creates a complete void in space, visually, both like through your eyes and through your sensors. And he'll use that, and I'll get to how he uses that in Courtship in a moment, since I'm getting close to that. But he uses those satellites to basically cloak the Second Death, and like completely shroud it so that the New Republic has no idea it's there. He at the end of the battle, he flies the wounded Iron Fist kind of around the back of the Night Cloak, or the cloak's Second Death. Hyperspaces the Iron Fist away, though he himself bails out and then detonates the Second Death before the New Republic can actually figure out it's there. So visually, it looks like the Iron Fist has exploded, but in reality, it's escaped and gone to Dathomir, which is where it will be for the rest of its time. So it's an interesting way to like kind of make it make sense where by the time Courtship rolls around, it's like Han has been looking for Zsinj, but he's like been under the radar and kind of disappeared at that point, and they like think he's dead. So it's an interesting way to kind of right around that issue that Alston would have even going into the series, where they needed to get away where or he needed to get to a point where Zsinj, like Han knows Zsinj is probably, well, he knows Zsinj is alive, but he thinks Iron Fist is destroyed, and like Zsinj is basically in hiding. So he needed to, Alston needed to get a way to get to that point, and I think the way he does it in Solo Command is very, very interesting. And the battle itself is very, very good as well. There's a lot I haven't gone into, like with the entire 181st Squadron that Wedge fights and Rogue and Wraith Squadron fight. That's a whole other thing. A lot of minor details for the Wraith Squadron trilogy. I think I've already gone a little bit too long of what I wanted to do for that, but I'll try and kind of summarize my thoughts on the Wraith Squadron trilogy as a whole here. So it's a very, very fun trilogy to go through, since I think it has very, very good battles, both in space and on the ground. The character work is really, really good. I think that like the Wraiths are very, very fun characters to watch grow, and they're very different. The villains, especially Zsinj, are incredible. I think any good story needs a good villain. And Zsinj, not that he was original to the Wraith Squadron trilogy, but he was greatly expanded on in the trilogy. And I think he is absolutely fantastic in those books, and he just provides such a good antithesis to the New Republic. Trigget, to a lesser extent, he's more of a I'd say probably more of a generic kind of villain, military commander villain, where he's kind of arrogant and but like doesn't have too much of a character to him. He's like a little arrogant, a little ambitious, but it's really Zsinj is really the one you're kind of coming to see if you're looking for the villain. Yeah, for that. I think some of the things that the trilogy doesn't do well, mainly I think the romance angles. There's some romance mainly between the Wraiths. And not that I think romance, like having those romantic angles is bad. I just don't think it's just not the strong suit, in my opinion, of those books, which is kind of understandable because I think it's not really, supposed to be a romance trilogy or series of romance novels whatsoever. It's supposed to be it's more action, more thrilling, adventure, that kind of stuff, with some romance added on. And some of the dynamics between some of the Wraiths when they get together is fun, but it's I just think the romance parts of it are definitely could have been a little better. That's that. But overall, the trilogy is fun. It provides a really, really it just provides an interesting look at like a prolonged campaign against a very competent and very devious enemy commander in Warlord Zsinj, and also shows how the New Republic is managing post defeat of the Emperor, and like since the induction of the New Republic specifically. I might, double back if I think of anything more like super important to think on these, on the trilogy itself, but I'm going to move on to Courtship now, because Courtship is very different. And it's so going in when I was reading these, I knew that the X-Wings series of novels as a whole is very well received. I think Wraith Squadron less so, more just because Wraith Squadron doesn't get focused as much in the overall expanding universe as Rogue Squadron does. Not that Wraith Squadron is bad at all. It's just that more people are fans of Rogue Squadron, so I think more people like the Rogue Squadron novels because of that compared to Wraith Squadron. As for Courtship, the fandom reception of it, at least from what I can tell in like current day and like what people think of it, is pretty mixed. And I would agree 100%. I think there are aspects of Courtship that are good. I also think there are aspects of Courtship that are really bad, basically. So I said it before towards the start of this. So the main point of Courtship is, or like the main story arc of Courtship is the love triangle. Since it's adding drama to to Han and Leia's relationship that will eventually. So the novel does end with Han and Leia getting married. So it's adding drama to get to that point. My thoughts on that are that it was not needed, basically. I think that I don't think just inserting drama into a romance angle is necessary just in general. I just think it's kind of needless. And so already that's kind of a mark against the book, in my opinion. This is, again, my opinion on the book. But Dave Wolverton wanted to tell the story, and that's fine. He's perfect. He's the guy who got to write a Star Wars novel, not me. I'm completely jealous of him in that. I would love to write a Star Wars novel. So who's really winning here? Anyway, but so my main issue with drama involving Han and Leia's relationship specifically is that there was never really any, like, doubt as to their relationship coming out of episode 6. So, like, we see in episode 4, there's not much romance, like specific romance for them. It's a lot of, like, more yelling rather than flirting, basically. But since episode 5 takes place around 3 years after episode 4, there's a lot of off-screen development between the two. And obviously by the end of episode 5, Leia has confessed her love to Han, the classic "I love you, I know" scene, which is awesome. It's such a good scene. It's so good. So good. And then by the end of episode 6, they're like, you can definitively say they are a couple. Like, and it's even like Han was almost like, he's completely respective of Leia's feelings, since at the end of the movie where they're on Endor after the Death Star is blown up, and Leia was talking with Luke about something, and Han's like asking her about, like, basically was asking if, like, they were a thing, and, like, if it is, that's fine, it's whatever, I won't get in between you two. And Leia's like, oh no, it's just we're actually brothers, or, well, brother sister, we're siblings. It's not like that. So it's I just want to put that in mind. Han doesn't seem like the jealous type. He is respectful of Leia's feelings, and even then, Leia is respectful of Han, and they are both in love with each other by the end. Like, I'm almost certain they kiss. It's like at some point in episode 6, multiple times in episode 6. I'm pretty sure. I have to, go back and watch it. But I'm almost certain they kiss in episode 6. And again, they're married by the Heir to the Empire trilogy. So it's like, there shouldn't be a question for their relationship, which is why I really don't like what the characterization of Han or Leia in this novel at all. So the main conflict for this love triangle is that Courtship of Princess Leia introduces a new faction, basically, known as the Hapes Consortium. So Hapes is a planet, isolated planet, that is the center of the Hapes Consortium. Basically a whole group of planets all clustered together near Hapes. It is a matriarchal society, ruled by the Queen Mother. Her, Taichum is her name. And her son, Prince Isolde, has fallen in love with Leia. Leia, not too long before the start of the novel, had visited Hapes on a diplomatic mission, and Isolde fell in love with her there and has since wanted to marry her. So early on in courtship, Isolde basically flies his entire Hapen fleet out to Coruscant to basically propose to Leia, essentially. And there's this huge elaborate ceremony where his retainers present gifts from all 63 worlds, and it's just riches upon riches upon riches. And Isolde eventually asks Leia for her hand in marriage, to be his queen, to rule over Hapes with him. Basically to rule over Hapes with him at her side, basically, since it's a female-dominated society there. Han immediately gets jealous of this, since at this point it's the novel establishes that he's been fighting against Zsinj for, at this point, basically a year and a half and has not had many results. And he just gets very self-conscious where, like, he's just a smuggler. He's got nothing. He's had no results to show for in his work with the New Republic. And Isolde's got everything, basically. He's nice, he's handsome, he's got riches beyond compare, and there's nothing that he can do to compare with Isolde whatsoever. That's kind of the motivation that Han has, which, again, Han was never really seen to be someone that was like the explicitly jealous in terms of like a lover type. Just with his interactions with Leia in Episode 6, at least from what I get. And so Leia, meanwhile, is she sees Isolde and falls in love with him almost immediately. And one thing, so as much as I don't like the romance in the love triangle in Courtship, one thing that I do actually think was done well is Leia's eventual realization, for why she falls in love with Isolde. And it's not just because of his handsomeness, his riches, his polite attitude. It's that he was willing to provide, and he could have been the solution for her problems with trying to find a home for her Alderaanian people, since Alderaan was blown up in Episode 4 by the Death Star. She's looking to, have her, like, give her people a new home, basically. And Isolde was someone who could have given her that option. Like, he, with her, if the two had married, she could have, found, like, taken one of the Hapen worlds and resettled her people there. That's kind of the idea she falls in love with, that she kind of realizes going over the story, which I think is actually good. That's one aspect of Leia's character and at one aspect of the writing that I think is actually done well. And I'll go over more. I'm going more to start with what I dislike about the novel than going into what I like about the novel, because this is it's the one I finished the most recently, and also the one I have the most divisive opinions about. Or I'd say the novel I'm the most divisive over, and the one that I have the most opinions about, compared to the Wraith Squadron trilogy, where I'm just more like, yeah, these are fun adventures. Don't have too much to criticize on them. This one I have a lot more to criticize about. So so the love triangle aspect for both Han, I don't like their characterization either way. I don't like how jealous Han comes off, and he only gets worse over the course of the story. Leia also basically just becomes a hopeless romantic over much of the story, where most of her perspective and her thoughts are basically just like, oh, I love this about Han, I love this about Isolde, I love this and that. It's a lot of basically just playing with her feelings and like why she likes this, why she likes that, rather than, and like why she dislikes this, why she dislikes that, which Leia was never really a helpless romantic type in the original trilogy whatsoever. She was like the one competent one of, like, between her, Han, and Luke, she was like the one who had the best head on her shoulders. She's the one in the Death Star actually like moving things along, doing things correctly, and getting the guys out after they bust her out of the prison cell. And then she's also the one that's leading. She's a general at that point by Episode 5. Like she's not a hopeless romantic. She's the one getting stuff done. And so in Courtship, she just is not someone who gets a lot of stuff done. And the one time where she like really does get stuff done is off screen, which really frustrated me. And I'll get to that in a sec. So, all right, I'll go over one more thing of how we eventually get to where most of the story takes place. So, another thing that I really dislike about Han's character is that, so Han devises a plan to win Leia's heart back. And he understands that Leia is looking to a soldier, and what he offers as a chance for the Alderanian people to find a new home. He understands that, so he goes and wins a planet through sabacc, which is, it's kind of they kind of hand wave it a little bit. It's like, of course, he just happens to find a sabacc game where he can win a planet to then give to Leia. But it's also kind of it's Star Wars, and it's whatever. He wins the planet Dathomir, which if you know Star Wars pretty well, especially recent Star Wars, you kind of know where this is going. So, and fun fact, this is where Dathomir originated from. This is its first appearance, and I'll get to Dathomir in a sec. So, Han's plan for getting Leia to Dathomir is... So, one of the gifts that Isolde and his retinue brought was a Hapen gun of command. It is a gun that, instead of shooting a bullet, it shoots, I guess, like an energy wave or something that can basically pseudo-mind controls someone for a limited period of time. It's hence the name Gun of Command. It can basically, you shoot someone with it, it does no damage to them, but like it doesn't hurt them at all, but it basically gives you command over them for a limited period of time. I think that might specify it's not important how long. It might be like an hour at most. His plan is which he does also, he takes the Gun of Command, he shoots Leia with it, and forces her to come with him on the Millennium Falcon, and he basically, he literally kidnaps her, puts her in one of the smuggling compartments, so she'll just basically be stuck there when she eventually wakes up from her mind control, and just jets off to Dathomir. that is how he gets Leia to Dathomir. So him, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and Leia unwillingly head to Dathomir. That is how this happens, which I think it was a terrible writing decision. It's just so frustrating because it's like I understand that they need that Wolverton needed the gang to get to Dathomir, and that Leia probably wouldn't be willing to go at this point, because she's kind of getting fed up with Han and is jealousy at this point, because there's been multiple interactions between Han and Isolde where Han's very, very jealous of him at this point, and very snarky and very Han Solo, and amplifying his negative aspects that we do see. I don't think this was a good way to do it. I just think it makes Han come off even so much worse. But eventually, so that is what happens. Eventually, they get to Dathomir, or along the way to Dathomir, Han has Leia basically make a promise to him where they'll spend a week there. If Leia doesn't fall in love with him by then, he'll bring her back, and she can go off with Isolde and get married and do whatever there. So that's the agreement they make. Of course, things immediately go sideways because Dathomir is actually in orbit. It is where Zsinj is basically keeping all of his ships. That it's his main base of operations. So of course, Han managed to find the literal worst planet possible to go to and win in a card game. And so I should also clarify that since this book has come out before the Wraith Squadron trilogy, Zsinj is much less of a character in this. And so the events in the Wraith Squadron novels don't have too much of an influence on Courtship, since obviously they happened after the fact in the real world, not in universe. In universe, they obviously happened before, but out of universe, they didn't. Anyway, the Millennium Falcon basically gets damaged and crash lands onto Dathomir, which, for those who don't know, is a planet full of force witches. Basically, it's various different tribes of women who are attuned to the force, and although their powers are more of a traditional like fantasy magic base in nature rather than what we see normally in Star Wars, which is cool. It's part of, besides just the love triangle in Courtship, a lot of it is leaning more into fantasy and adventure, which I think is it works well for Star Wars. A lot of Star Wars is already kind of science fantasy, and this leans a lot more into fantasy as a as a genre. So after Han and Leia, Chewie, and 3PO crash land, they have their whole thing. Isolde, who is tracking Leia at this point to try and rescue her from Han, winds up teaming up with Luke to go rescue them from, or basically to rescue Leia from Han. And they also wind up crash landing on Dathomir after engaging with Zsinj's forces in orbit. So that's kind of the setup for the whole thing. I won't go piece by piece through this story either, but that's the setup for the majority of Courtship's story. So, and my thing is that I don't like a lot of the setup, and I don't like how Han and Leia are framed as characters. Han doesn't get that much better over the course of the story. Leia's main lovesick, hopelessly in love, whatever you want to call it, moment where she actually shows off her diplomatic skills, which is a core part of her character. She's a really, really good diplomat. She is negotiating with one of the. So I can't necessarily call them Night Sisters because Night Sisters are a specific faction within the Dathomiri witches. So anyway, one of the Dathomiri witch clans, the Singing Mountain clan, who's kind of the good guys essentially. In this case, Leia negotiates with their leader, Ogma, I think is her name. She basically negotiates a peace treaty with the Singing Mountain clan and negotiates Han's release after they were all captured by the Singing Mountain clan after an ambush with Imperials. And anyway, Leia is able to negotiate a lot of stuff with Ogwyn, the leader of the Singing Mountain clan. All of that happens off screen, which is so frustrating. Instead, we follow Han as we see more of the Dathomirian witch culture, which isn't bad. One thing that I think is really, really well done is the description and what we see of these new cultures, both Dathomir and Hapes. That's, I think, done very, very well. It's just, in this case, it was at the cost of seeing Leia, some really good Leia moments that could have really fleshed out her character in this novel. That's one thing that I, again, really disliked, and it just did not help with the characterization of either Han or Leia. One character, though, to kind of move a little bit more into the good aspects of this story is, I think Luke is very, very well done as a character in this story. This is a Luke Skywalker that we see that is very, very in tune with Jedi teachings and the Force as a whole. It's definitely his Luke at his most Jedi master that I think we'd seen at that point in time. He's basically looking for Jedi archives, like lost Jedi archives that eventually lead him to Dathomir anyway. It was basically he wound up going to Dathomir to go help Isolde rescue Leia, and Dathomir wound up being the place where he finds the archives basically as a bonus. But Luke is very, very well written, I think, in this novel, since he's definitely a Jedi master at this point, but he's also very inexperienced in teaching, since he has not had a proper student yet to impart the ways of the Jedi. And what I think is a very clever way that Wolverton did it was that Luke basically uses Isolde as a trial run for his Jedi teachings, which I think is it's very amusing, since Isolde he's a little impatient, and Luke uses most of his teachings after they get to Dathomir. He does a little bit before, but a lot of it is after they get to Dathomir. And by then, Isolde is kind of getting really impatient and just really wanting to go, just not be on Dathomir, since he is not enjoying his time there, and B, rescue Leia from Dathomir from Han so he can go marry her. So Luke basically teaching Isolde all of the Jedi ways, including patience, despite Isolde not being force sensitive whatsoever, is really, really, it's a very creative way of, A, showing Luke's growth, and also B, like allowing Luke to get some practice in before, he starts actually teaching future Jedi. And he actually does wind up applying that teaching a bit faster than he expected. So Luke actually winds up finding the crashed ship that is actually the archives that he was looking for, the Jedi archives. Him and Isolde at that time end up getting captured by a Dathomiri witch named Teneniel Jo, spelled DJO for her last name. Teneniel is a young Dathomiri witch, very powerful with the Force, but very emotional as well, in a good way, in the sense of like has a lot of character depth to her, and like her emotions when it comes to her witch powers, her Force powers, basically. Offers a lot for Luke to train her. And Teneniel's a really fascinating character in this novel. I think they probably could have focused on her a bit more and her growth over the story, but she's very, very fascinating and provides a good look into Dathomiri culture as a whole. It's also both the Dathomiri and Hapan culture is both matriarchal in nature, which is interesting to see. And Teneniel's sort of a big proponent of it, and also like I guess not really a big proponent of it, more of like she helps naturally exposit, I would say, a lot of how Dathomir's culture works. Mainly to Luke and Isolde, and where basically she captures, I guess captures would be the word, both of them, more Isolde than Luke. Luke kind of lets himself get captured because he doesn't really want to fight Teneniel, but she 100% captures Isolde because she's very, very skilled, and that's how Dathomiri witches just claim their husbands. Like it's almost like capturing a Pokemon, where it's like I choose this person to be my husband, and they go out and basically just take him home forcibly, since that's how it's always been for them. That's just their way of life, and so it's interesting to see like how that culture kind of clashes. I mean, with this established like. Like less barbaric, I suppose, but less aggressive styles of finding someone to marry, I would say. But her and Isolde actually have a very interesting bond, and they actually, by the end of it, they fall in love, which is cool. And I think that's, for as much as I harp on the romance between Han, Leia, and Isolde, I think Isolde and Teneniel, their romance is actually, it's a little underbaked, since it's not really the focus, but when they eventually, start to get together and like start talking individually and start having some romantic moments between the two, that's actually done really, really well. They have one scene late in the novel where they're both staring together at the stars above Dathomir, and they're talking about like Teneniel wants to go visit the stars, and she's asking Isolde about his travels and like where Hapes may be, and it's really nice. It's a really good tender moment, and it's like I read that and I say like, oh yeah, I can see why I can see why Wolverton wanted to write a romance novel, since he's actually pretty good at writing romance when it's not this frustrating love triangle. But anyway, Teneniel is a fascinating character where she's powerful in the Force, and Luke basically trains her, or attempts to train her in the ways of the Jedi, to basically not let her emotions cloud her judgment, not fall to the dark side, and use her powers for good. And Teneniel, who's young at this point, she's like 18, 19, 20, something like that. It's very young. Maybe a little older, but like not old in the slightest. She tries to take the lessons to heart, but she actually does wind up using dark side, or not falling to the dark side, but letting her emotions get the better of her during the final, like the climactic battle. And it's interesting to see where her arc is, that like she doesn't master Jedi teaching, right away. She still struggles with, letting her emotions get the better of her, and is like, lets her emotions allow her to kill some of the Night Sisters in battle. So it's an interesting like little story arc for her, where her journey isn't complete, which is cool. I think it's cool to see that, like, she, despite her desires to do good and Luke's teachings, it's not all quite there yet. It's not perfect, which is cool. Anyway, I should probably talk about the villains now, since that's kind of, without just going, line by line through the actual story. It's a lot of basically just the good guys on Dathomir slowly banding together against the villains, who I haven't really introduced. So, or the villains besides Zsinj. So, since there are a ton of different clans of Dathomir witches on Dathomir, one of them is known as the Night Sisters. They are the ones who have basically fallen to the dark side, are completely willing to kill and do evil things using their powers, which they, I think, basically they call magic, and like they have to speak their like what they want to, their spells. They do specifically call them spells. It is using the Force, harnessing the Force, but they have to verbally use it, or like verbally chant an incantation, basically. So it's a lot more leaning heavily into that fantasy aspect of like classic magic there, which is cool. It's something that I enjoy seeing Star Wars do, where they're like explore different aspects of the Force and like Force users, and culture in the Force. So the Night Sisters are led by a woman named Gethzerian, who is this old, the book like repeatedly calls her an old hag, which I just find amusing. But she is immensely powerful, and immensely dangerous. So in the novel, it kind of expands on her and her relation to Zsinj a little bit, and also further material supplements this. But basically, the gist of it is, in Legends, Palpatine was able to sense Gethzerian and her power. He sent Zsinj to Dathomir, and Zsinj basically blockaded the planet permanently and prevented any ships from getting in or out, because Palpatine didn't want Gethzerian to leave the planet whatsoever, since he didn't have an easy way of killing her. Keep that in mind when I talk about what happens to Gethzerian at the end, because that is something that I'm going to be ranting about here in a moment. So anyway, so Zsinj has basically been blockading Dathomir for years now, and keeping Gethzerian trapped there for a while. Gethzerian's goal, she basically thinks she's done all she needs to on Dathomir. Like, she's the ultimate power there, and she wants more power and to spread her influence more across the galaxy, since she knows now that there is a galaxy out there full of people to mess with. They do whatever I don't know what she wants to do with them. But So like her goal over the novel is to basically find Han Solo and have him give up the Millennium Falcon so she can basically take it for herself and for her fellow Night Sisters to just leave Dathomir as a whole, and go out into the galaxy and get her revenge on the Empire and Zsinj and all that. So much of the conflict over the course of Courtship is the good guys, Han, Leia, Luke, Taniniel, Isolde, and the Singing Mountain Clan fighting against Gethzerian, the Night Sisters, and the few Imperials left on the planet that Gethzerian's basically just holding hostage in order to fight for, like, basically, and it's a situation where they either fight for Gethzerian or die. And it's interesting. There's like multiple skirmishes, and it's a lot of like showcasing Gethzerian and the Night Sisters, wacky and evil powers compared to what like Taniniel can do, and what Luke can do with the Force. So it's a lot of spiritual stuff there, and it's some pretty good aspects of it there. All with the threat of Zsinj and his fleet looming over, literally over Dathomir. And for reference at this point, it's not really stated in the novel, but it's kind of like almost retcon sort of. But the Iron Fist, the Star Destroyer, is basically under permanent repair in the shipyards above Dathomir. So it's not like, it's sort of halfway functional at this point. But Zsinj still has a fleet to aid him. So it's a lot of like Han tends to voice his issues a lot, where like even if they defeat Gethzerian, they still have no real way of getting off the planet since Zsinj basically has had it blockaded. So it's a lot of eventual despair, but as the story progresses and things go up and down for the heroes, there's eventually there is the climactic battle, but before that, Zsinj is able to learn that Han Solo survived and is on the planet. So he sends down Melvar basically to make a deal with Gethzerian, where he is willing to give Gethzerian a ship so long as she can bring him Han Solo. And she agrees, although basically they kind of both double cross each other at various points. And Gethzerian's never able to actually get Han Solo and deliver him to Zsinj. Not that she really wanted to anyway. She was basically just willing to play the game as far as she could until Zsinj sent down a ship for her to escape with. Which he eventually does, though not after he uses his orbital night cloak satellites to shroud the entire planet in darkness, which basically just turn the lights off for the entire planet, block the sun from shining on any parts of Dathomir. And basically it's a sudden threat of the lack of any sun and the sudden drop in temperatures will basically just completely destroy the planet's ecosystem in the span of 3 days. I think that's what the time limit is given, or that he gives for basically everyone over the course of that story. So Zsinj is he basically uses it as a ultimatum for Gethzerian to basically get me Han Solo now, or you and your entire planet will die. So she does, and eventually Zsinj sends down Melvar with a couple ships to retrieve Han Solo. Gethzerian basically just kills Melvar and the entire Imperial force there, and loads up her Night Sisters onto one of the ships. And so I've raced ahead more towards the finale. So this is after a massive battle between after the Night Cloak has gone up, but it's basically a massive battle in the darkness between the Night Sisters and then basically all the good guys at the home of the Singing Mountain Clan. And it's an okay battle. It's not the best, I think that's described out there, but it's good enough. But after that, Gethzerian returns home to basically, she's made her home base a former Imperial prison that basically housed just a bunch of political prisoners and whatnot. she basically sends a transmission to Han Solo where she's willing to kill prisoners if he doesn't come to her, so she can deliver him to Zsinj and then release the Night Cloak and give her the ship she desires. So Han goes over to Gethzirian and gets tortured a little bit. Then Melvar comes down, dies, whatever. Anyway, so brief little summary there. After I'm trying to stay positive here, but this is where I go back into the negative territory. So I said before that a good story needs a good villain. A good story also needs a good villain defeat. Like, a good villain works well because it's satisfying to see them lose and like get defeated by the hero, which I think is pretty classic storytelling. This story does not do that well at all with either of its villains. So I'm going to spoil this because I just think it's terrible and I want to rant about it. Gethzirian loads up herself and all of her Night Sisters at the base, basically, into one of the shuttles that Zsinj had provided. And she starts flying out away from Dathomir into space. At that point, shortly after that, Luke, Leia, Isolde, Chewie, 3PO, they fly the Falcon over and pick up Han from the prison. They rescue him and start following Gethzirian in her shuttle, they're kind of trying to shoot her down, but also just kind of tracking her. And eventually both ships make it into space. And basically what happens is Han almost broadcasts to Zsinj, like not directly, but basically just kind of snitches on the fact that Gethzirian is in the escaping shuttle. And Zsinj literally just takes one of his ships and blows up the shuttle. That's it. Like, all Gethzirian and all the Night Sisters are just die. Like, it's so anticlimactic. Like, there's just so much left on the table for an incredibly powerful villain, and someone who has literally terrorized Dathomir for decades. And they just go out like, just boom, that's it. Like, there's no, like, even in the big climactic battle in the Singing Mountain Clan, Gethzirian's not really there that often. Like, she fights a little bit with Luke, but even then, not really. Like, she has no massive climactic duel with Luke Skywalker, where you can emphasize the, you can draw on the light and dark side of the Force and, do some stuff there with, Gethzirian's this like master of the dark side and powers beyond comprehension there, whereas Luke's this paragon of the light side. They don't do that. They also, or I say they, it's one person writing this. It's just it's only Dave Wolverton. He does not also there's no confrontation between Gethzirian or Teneniel, and Teneniel, I believe, is Gethzirian's niece also, and we see so much over the course of the story of how Gethzirian and her Night Sisters and just the dark side philosophy of them affects Dathomir as a whole and Teneniel as a character. And so just having like little to no impact or like confrontation between those two, like they get a small like showdown where they don't even really fight. And like they mostly just exchange some words. Like Teneniel does fight a few other, like, they might be named, but basically just background character Night Sisters. But it's like, it's not nearly to the level and like not nearly as effective as what a dramatic and final confrontation could have been with between Teneniel and Gethzirian could have been, which would have just been so much more interesting than Gethzirian just scurrying away in a ship only to have that ship just get blown out of the sky and just have her die like that. Like, it's so anticlimactic for such a powerful villain, where the whole point of her, like, why she's trapped on Dathomir is that the Emperor had no like easy way of killing her. Like, if he had done that, he would have done it. Like if there's an easy way for her to die, he would have done it ages ago. So he didn't have to worry about Gezirian at all. Like, it's like, if you're playing Pokemon, it's like I'd rather just have the move where I do damage instead of setting up and doing status moves. The best status is reducing your enemy's HP to 0. It's like it's such a confusing writing decision from what I can tell. It's like why have this such a powerful villain who is established to be like a threat where there's no conventional way of dealing with her die in such a mundane and conventional way. It's still just, it bothers me so much. And then Zsinj's death, like 5 minutes later, basically, is not any better. Basically, after Gezirian blows up, Han takes over piloting the Falcon from Luke, and they're able to take down the Night Cloak with the Falcon. They destroy some of the satellites and then burst out into space definitively to go see what's up there. And by then, Isolde's mother, Taichum, has brought the Hapen fleet, which is absolutely massive, to fight with Zsinj's forces and rescue Isolde. Which that's fine. That part's fine. That's whatever. It's just that Han pilots the Falcon over to the Iron Fist, gets caught in the tractor beam of the Iron Fist in order to slip through the shields. Basically just breaks out of the tractor beam just because he can, flies up to the bridge of Iron Fist, and then just blows it up. That's it. Zsinj is dead. It's just that. There's no like huge drawn out climactic space battle with Zsinj between these two rivals. And obviously I shouldn't detract it too much of stuff seen in the Wraith Squadron trilogy, since that comes after, or that came after in real life. But even still, it's like we got a decent amount of setup between those two characters, even in Courtship, where it's having that be the end is such a anticlimactic way. The one good thing about it is that Han opens a transmission to Zsinj right before he blows up the bridge, where he says, "Kiss my Wookiee," and that is hilarious. So that's like the one silver lining I can say for this whole just terrible ending for really just the book in general. I think is the "Kiss my Wookiee" line. That line is absolutely hilarious, and I think definitely in line with Han Solo's character. That one I will agree. But it doesn't save Zsinj's death at all. It doesn't save it from just being incredibly anticlimactic, and like it's such a like even worse of a gut punch, or just like deflation of enthusiasm of going back to back Gezirian's death and Zsinj's death, being like both incredibly anticlimactic, is just really, really disappointing. Anyway, that's like one of my major pet peeves with this book, is those two endings, or like the deaths of their villains, and really just kind of that ending in general. Let's see. As for the rest of the novel, since I got a good chunk of it, overall I don't think it's a bad novel. Like I kind of said before, I think the development that Wolverton does of developing new cultures in both Hapes and Dathomir is really, really good. And overall, the new characters that he introduced are very interesting. Isolde and Teneniel especially. And also, one thing that I kind of alluded to, but I didn't mention exactly, was Isolde's motivation for marrying Leia. Like Leia's motivations for marrying Isolde, and her eventual realization for why she doesn't want to marry him, and eventually falls back in love with Han, with her realizing that she's falling in love with him for the idea of a new Alderaan, essentially. Isolde is kind of similar, so his mother, Taichum, runs Hapes in a very aggressive, almost warmongering yet still isolationist way. And he basically views it as a way of the past, where he prefers peace over war and just being less antagonistic overall. Like he just doesn't see being overly aggressive, overly antagonistic as a proper way to rule. And so he sees Leia as basically the antithesis to his mother, and also as, like almost as a way to spite her, as both an outsider to Hapes and also as a pacifist. Basically, Leia's like not necessarily a stated like complete pacifist, but someone who would much rather talk things out rather than fight things out. And that's like, even though he says like, and he probably does fall in love with her for like her beauty and whatnot, but that's like the main thing, is that he falls in love with the idea of Leia being the kind of woman he thinks should rule Hapes, which I think is an interesting, character trait for him, and a very cool motivation, and an understandable motivation as well for someone in his position, where he's a good person. Like Isolde has his issues. He's a bit too forceful in things and a little arrogant here and there, but overall Isolde is a good person at heart. And so him wanting to find a good person, morally good person to rule Hapes compared to his mother, who is morally questionable at best. His mother's actually a terrible person, as it gets revealed on. She is actually, I won't spoil too much on that, but his mother is actually not a very good person whatsoever. So him having the motivation to find basically someone to rule Hapes in the future be better than Taya Chum is very understandable and very interesting. It's for these characters. I think Wolverton does a good job of introducing characters and cultures. I just think that the central driving force, that being the love triangle, is the weakest part of the story. So those are my thoughts on the story itself. One final thing I want to end on here for Courtship specifically is what Courtship, the legacy it left in Star Wars as a whole. Since despite Courtship being a pretty mediocre story, at least in my opinion, but I think also in opinions of a lot of other people as well in the Star Wars fandom, it introduced a ton for the greater lore of Star Wars, and like its legacy of stuff outside of the, like, it's interesting to see that the Courtship of Princess Leia, the legacy of it is remembered more for some of the stuff that, like, the world building that it did and the characters it introduced, rather than the story itself. Mainly in both Hapes and Dathomir. So Hapes is an expanded universe only thing, whereas Dathomir has since been adapted into canon. But Hapes got a lot more of or it was fleshed out a lot more in the New Jedi Order series, which is this very long, it's like 30 something novels. I want to say are like 20 or 30, where it's set. It's basically the main characters are mostly the kids of a lot of the heroes. So Han and Leia's twins, Jason and Jaina Solo, as well as their later kid, Anakin Solo, Luke and his wife's kid, I think it's Ben Skywalker is his name. Isolde and Taniniel are present in a lot of the New Republic or New Jedi Order stories, and their kid, Tenel Kajo, is who winds up marrying Jason Solo. So like it's a lot of the legacy, or hate basically, is very, very prevalent in a lot of future Star Wars stories, which is cool to see for a culture that was, or like a culture and a planet and a society that is built up pretty well in Courtship. And then also for Dathomir. So it was definitely included more in a variety of legend stories, mainly in the like Rancors and Force Witches and whatnot, and Taniniel and all that. But it really got it really got more popular in canon, in the new canon, Disney canon, whatever you want to call it. All that obviously, so it started out. It got reintroduced in the Clone Wars TV show with it's pretty similar. Force witches and all that. Home of Asajj Ventress, and also would kind of retconned into the home of Darth Maul and some Zabraks known as the Night Brothers. So a little bit of a deviation where it's not just a matriarchal society. The Dathomir in canon, as we know it now, there isn't just one force. Like the Dathomirian witch society isn't the only one on the planet, but it's one of the more popular ones, or one of the more prominent ones, I should say, not popular. But yeah, the Dathomir would go on. We see it a ton in saw it a lot in Clone Wars. Would get introduced, or we see it again in Jedi Fallen Order. That's one of the planets you can visit. So it's a lot of see it more basically in a different version of it in the new canon, which is cool. So it's for Courtship, for where a story that over like the actual details of it may have been kind of forgotten as the greater expanding universe went on. And for a novel as a whole that is not the best whatsoever in the expanded universe catalog, it actually leaves a really, really lasting legacy, which I think is very, very interesting to see. So I think that's going to be all for my thoughts on these 4 novels. I'm definitely forgetting some things, or at least I definitely didn't talk about everything. And I didn't want to talk about every single aspect because there's still plenty of, I don't want to just completely, do a summary, detailed summary of all the books. Cause A, that would take forever. B, I want to have my listeners, if you haven't read the books, go read them. Cause I think they're interesting. They're fun. I mean, Courtship, you can, if you want to skip it, you can. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the best read out there. But yeah, I mean, you obviously heard my thoughts. I have very mixed opinions on it. But overall, I think the book's, it's not horrible, but it's definitely got some glaring issues to it. But the Wraith Squadron books are really fun. I enjoy those a ton. Especially if you're like me, where you like space battles and just Star Wars in general, and adventures and those kind of things. I think those are some very fun novels to check out. And I don't want to spoil everything that happens because it's no fun to go into a story where you know everything that's going to happen. That's my thoughts on all of that. I definitely am going to do more Star Wars episodes in the future because I know I can talk so much longer about so many more things. Right now I'm going through book 8 in the X-Wing series, so the one right after Solo Command, which is Isard's Revenge. And that one's been fun so far. I'm only a couple hours into the audiobook there. But yeah, it's very fun. I also just recently wrapped up Scoundrels by Timothy Zahn, who wrote the Heir to the Empire trilogy, amongst many others. Scoundrels is very fun. It's basically Ocean's 11, but Star Wars. I very much recommend that one. That one's just it's just a fun little adventure there. Fun little heist story. But as for current plans for next episode, most likely it will just wind up being my my recap of week 1 in the NFL. That's probably, given that it's less than a week away now from when I'm recording this, I'll probably just wind up waiting till probably the Tuesday after week 1 to just record my thoughts on week 1 in the NFL. I don't have anything specific in my mind of what I want to do episode wise before then, so it's probably just going to be that. So yeah, that's probably gonna be next episode. Other than that, again, I want to do episodes on various games that I like more, Star Wars, and just other stuff. So yeah, that's probably what it's going to be in the future. Look forward to more NFL and more various other nerdy stuff here coming up. Thank you for listening.